Warning: the following podcast, which contains strong language and mature content, is unsuitable for children or for the faint of heart. The subject matter discussed will be frightening and graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
When you wanna hear about the paranormal, you get the Spooked Girls. True crime that makes you hypothermal. With the three Spooked Girls, stabby snippets will give you dreams. Tara and Jessica will make you along with the Spooked Girls. Bring on the slaughter, we on that haunted ground. Spooked Girls. The three Spooked Girls.
Hey there, Spooksters, and welcome back to another episode here on Three Spooked Girls. My name is Jessica, and as always, I am joined by my favorite ghoul friend, Tara.
Hey, Spooksters.
Today, for our stabby snippet, we are doing the story of Ma Barker. If you remember, Tara told us about some kind of lesser known female serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
And she was on this list. So I was like, bet I'm going to do this because she apparently a crime boss.
I love this. Her picture alone, you knew she was a badass.
Mm-hmm. So Ma Barker goes by many names. She was born Arizona Donnie Clark, but she went by Ari or Kate Baker or Ma Baker or Rita Ma Baker. She has several names. I do feel like kind of gangsters from that time frame had multiple names.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
She was born on October 8th, 1873 to John and Amalian, I don't know how to say her name, Clark in Ash Grove, Missouri. So not too far from Oklahoma border.
Neighbor.
Yeah, she all up in Oklahoma, trust me. Her family actually would call her Ari, which I was like, why do they call her Ari? I was like, her name is Arizona. I get it.
Well, the first three letters.
Yeah, I get it now. I was dumb.
Oh, no. I was like...
Super cute. And it also makes me think of because I haven't really heard many women or many people be named Arizona, but it makes me think of Grey's Anatomy because one of the doctors, his first name is Arizona.
Oh.
Yeah. So around the age of 19, Ma would enter her first and only legal marriage to a man by the name of George Barker. And I say first and legal, you'll understand it a little bit. They had 4 sons, but they would eventually move to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where George would work a series of low wage or low skilled jobs. And he worked for the water company. He was a farmer. He was a watchman, a station engineer, and a clerk. So not really high thinking, high paying jobs. The FBI, I was like, ooh, the FBI involved. The FBI would describe George as shiftless. And I was like, first and foremost, 2 things. 1, the FBI has a description of you. That's
not good.
Fun fact, right? Second, it's not a nice one because shiftless means you are lazy and have zero ambition. So they were like, man, not that great.
Mm-hmm.
The 2 would have 4 sons. Their son Herman would be born in 1893. Their son Lloyd would be born in 1897. Their son Arthur would be born in 1898. And their son Fred would be born in 1901. Apparently, according to the FBI, which I'm just I love that the FBI is the source for a lot of this story.
I know.
Neither George nor Ma gave a crap or paid any, quote unquote, paid any attention to their son's education. And the boys were more or less illiterate, which makes sense because they didn't have any skills. So the Barker boys started becoming criminals in the 1910s. Herman, at the age of 17, would begin his crime spree. That's when he was first arrested at the age of 17. In 1910, he was arrested. He went big. Tara. He was arrested for highway robbery in Webb City, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why that between the 1910s and the 1920s, the Barker family moved to Tulsa. They were like, well, maybe we should stop having our teenage delinquent sons do highway robbery. And I'm going to go through like literally all the major stuff later. There's a ton of it, but I'm going to go through it. And this would become a popular choice for Herman. And he and his brother Lloyd they supposedly joined the Central Park Gang of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And Herman was once again arrested for highway robbery on March 5th of 1915. But George wouldn't stay in the picture forever. He was not one to like be around. So George was last listed living with his wife in the 1928 census in Tulsa, or in the city directory. And it's either that she threw him out or that he left because he could not stand that his family had become a bunch of heathen criminals.
Oh.
Which I'm like, According to writer Miriam Allen DeFord, George gave up completely and removed himself from the scene. The FBI also said that George left Ma because she had, quote unquote, loose morals and was having outside dates with other men.
Okay.
And this would actually leave Ma to be like actually pretty impoverished. She lived in what was known as like a dirt floor shack from 1928 to 1930. And then she would actually in 1930, she met a jobless man by the name of Arthur Dunlap, or Dunlap is how it's sometimes spelled. And in the 1930 census, she's actually described as his wife, though they were not married, because technically her and George never divorced. He just fucking skedaddled. And this also, like from 1928 to 1930, all of her sons were in some sort of imprisonment and incarceration. But when they got out in 1931, when Fred got released, he actually joined a gang. They formed a gang with Alan Karpis, and they became the Barker Karpis Gang. Some friends said that George and Ma fought over what the boys were doing because Ma kind of approved that the boys were these like lawless men, but George did not. Though I will say that it did not, like, he wasn't technically noted as a criminal. In fact, people say that George wasn't a criminal. He just wasn't good at being a productive member of society. But when his sons would die, fun fact, they do, he would actually like be the one to like claim next of kin and get their death benefit stuff, like claim their shit.
Okay.
If you remember earlier, I mentioned that the boys joined the Central Park Gang. The Central Park Gang was also known as the Kim's Tyrell Gang, and it was a Prohibition-era bank robbing gang led by Matthew Keams and Ray Terrell. And they basically, it was like in the 1920s, their crime was high-profile robberies, but they also would escape from prison.
Of course.
Yeah, they would do that a lot. And apparently the members all were alleged to have sworn blood oaths to free each other from jail so that if they were ever captured or they would attempt to die. Roy Trail began working with the gang in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 1930s. And basically, oh my God, these people were just like, they would go and rob banks. Ray would use the alias G.R. Patton, and he and Arthur, which is one of the sons of the Barkers, went and robbed the Muskogee Bank in January of 1921. He was convicted of second-degree robbery, and they were both sentenced to 2 years in jail. And they actually like served their time, which I was like, Jesus Christ. But here's the fact. In 1923, on August 20th, they robbed, ready for this? The Kate Limited, which was the train car people.
Yeah.
They robbed $20,000 in cash and bonds
Holy
in 1923.
Did you look up how much that is today?
No, we'll Google it right now. $363,013.02 in today's money.
Damn, from one job?
Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
But this would be bad because this would result in a like shootout. These gangs all got in shootouts with law enforcement and stuff like that a lot. So Herman Baker, if you remember, after this like robbery, they ended up getting in a shootout with law enforcement, and Herman actually shot a cop. Like point blank shot a cop, and he actually ended up killing himself because he didn't want to go to prison.
Oh.
It said that he killed himself to avoid prosecution because there was like shootouts between them and other gangs and police officers, and he was injured. So yeah. Also, this was in 1927. This was before George left Ma, but a lot of people point to this moment because it's the loss of their first child. Herman was literally their firstborn child, but because he was dead, like he died, they were like, I think George was like, fuck this. Like, I can't, like, it's one thing that they're robbing banks or highway robberies and you're supporting this, but the fact that we lost a child, like, you need to put your foot down. So if you remember Ma in the 1930s, Ma met up with a man with last name of, it was Arthur Dunlap, and they basically started traveling around. And there was actually $100 reward because she was like part of the group, right? Quote unquote. There was $100 reward to capture old lady Ari Barker. And this is also about the time, like, all of the gang members would refer to her as Kate. So this is where like the Kate Barker came from, which actually makes sense. But also like the reason Ma Barker, because all of the gang members were like her fucking kids and their friends.
She was literally their mom.
Right. It was like, Ma. So in 1932, Arthur Barker is released from prison because the gang robberies, they all get caught.
Yeah.
So he's released from prison. Fred is released from prison, which is how they have the Karpis Barker gang or Barker Karpis gang, which however you want to say it. And they go to Chicago. And immediately their reputation is like, they're basically Depression era, Prohibition era gangsters. Who do you think in this area of Chicago they're going to catch attention? It's one Mr. Al Capone. And he was like, hey, boys, come work for me. And they were like, maybe not. Because, like, they all end up dead. Which is true. A lot of Capone's henchmen weren't, you know, he didn't have that much loyalty to them, especially Lowe. So they met this racketeer by the name of Jack Prefer, suggested that they move to St. Paul, Minnesota, because basically it was a safe haven for wanted criminals. And the group would move up there and they would begin to operate under the protection of one Mr. Thomas Brown, or known as Big Tom, who was the St. Paul's police chief. So they could have all of this, like, commotion and conundrum. It was basically said that like Ma's boyfriend wasn't very well liked, let's be real, because he was considered a drunk and he also was loose-lipped when he was drunk. So, you know, if you're drunk all the time, you're always talking. And members of the gang, especially Alvin Karpis, who is Fred's friend, who they have the gang together, they didn't trust him and they basically were like, he's a pain in the ass. And like one specific thing is that they were like in a hideout because they just committed a crime. And basically Arthur Dunlap he was like, oh, they're in this hideout and blah, blah, blah. And he's talking and a reporter from True Detective magazine is there. Basically, the only way they get out of this is that Big Tom, the chief of police, was like, dudes, you gotta go. Your mom's boyfriend is chit-chatting. The gang was like, Ma, he's gotta go. And they killed him and they left him naked in the street, essentially.
Well, damn.
He had a single bullet wound to the head. They were like, fuck this dude. They executioned him. They were like, yeah, talking. So let's get into like, we're going to run through the big things that they did. So from the 1900s to 1920s, Herman Baker, we talked about, did his first big robbery that I got caught for. And I want to say that's the one he got caught for because like, unless he was really bad at being a criminal, I don't really think you get caught the first time.
Well, no. And it's like, would your first job really be that big of a one?
Right. You probably were robbing other places first.
For sure.
We talked about when he joined the Central Park Gang in 1915. And in 1918, Arthur, or his name was Doc, was involved in a U.S. automobile theft and was arrested and then escaped.
Oh.
I love it. From 1920 to 1929, Arthur is arrested again in Joplin, Missouri, but he's returned to Oklahoma, to Tulsa. Lloyd, or Red Barker, is arrested for vagrancy. I mean, like, we're just talking like that kind of stuff. Arthur also went by Bob.
Oh, Bob Barker.
Bob Barker. Oh my God, it's Bob Barker.
Oh.
Bob Barker. That's the name he went to prison with in 1921.
And well, damn.
Yeah. So in 1921, we mentioned Fred is released from prison. They have their gang. They get arrested for like burglaries and they kind of build up to like their big shit. Mm-hmm. Then they move to St. Paul. On January 8th, 1935, Arthur is arrested in Chicago and a Barker gang member by the name of Russell Gibson is killed and they capture another gang member by the name of Byron Bolton. So basically they're like, where the fuck are the rest of your gang members? And they're like, we're not going to tell. But somehow either loose lips sink ships in this one or they found evidence. And basically they found out that Ma Barker and her son were in Florida. They were in Florida. They found stuff in the gang members' possessions. They found a map to where their hideout was. in Ocklawaha, Florida. So the FBI finds out, I know the FBI is totally involved with this. The FBI identified the house where the gang were staying from a reference to a local alligator known as Joe Gator, which was mentioned in a letter that Doc sent. Or that was sent to Doc, I should say. Basically, they found out they had like rented this house. So agents surrounded the house, and it's at 13250 East Highway C-25 on the morning of January 16th, 1935. The FBI were not aware that Alvin, Karpis, and like other gang members had left like 3 days earlier, and that it was only Ma and Fred in the house. So then the agents storm the house and they start firing, and it's apparently an hours long shootout between the two people inside and the FBI on the outside. Basically, they just kept shooting until gunfire stopped. Then they went inside, ordered the handyman for the rental property that they were at to go in. His name was Willie Woodbury. And they put him in a bulletproof vest and they're like, go inside and see if anyone's alive. How fucking rude of these FBI agents. And then they basically found both bodies of Fred and Ma in one of the front bedroom. They were together. Fred apparently was riddled with bullet wounds, where Ma appeared to have only a single bullet wound.
Oh, shit. They were shooting with the purpose for her.
According to the FBI, a Tommy gun was found lying in her hands. And other sources say that it was lying between the bodies of Ma and Fred. The bodies were put on public display and then stored unclaimed until October 1st of 1931, when relatives came to bury them, and they are buried in Welsh, Oklahoma. Don't you worry about the other Barker boys, because they would not do well for themselves in the future. So Herman has died. Arthur is in prison. Lloyd, or Red, he actually would go on to serve in World War II as a cook, and he was employed at like POW camps at Fort Custer in Michigan, and he actually received an honorable discharge, and he got a medal for good conduct. Could you imagine being like, I fucking murder people, but also look at my pretty award?
Very opposite.
Right? But on March 18th, 1949, Lloyd Barker's wife would murder him.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. And then she was sent to the Colorado State Insane Asylum. Now, a lot of people are like, how is Ma Baker connected to all of this? Like, how is she like the ringleader of this? And basically, some people think that because Ma was part of this shootout, that the FBI created this whole Ma was the ringleader and basically told them where to knock things off and do things. And she was kind of the mastermind behind it so that they could basically quantify killing an old woman.
Interesting.
Yeah. But according to the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover himself claimed that Ma Barker was the most vicious, dangerous, and resourceful criminal brain of the last decade.
Damn.
He also claimed that she enjoyed the lifestyle, that the fruits of her son's crimes, and supposedly had a string of lovers. Because, yeah, that was the other thing, is like when she lived in that dirt shack, apparently she was, she entertained a lot. Let's put it that way.
Gotcha.
So basically, her children were murderers and she was complicit in it. She has been in popular culture. There is a film from the 1960s called Ma Barker's Killer Brood. And then there's Bloody Mama from the 1970s. And then Public Enemies is apparently also about her in 1996. Ma Barker was just this like, I guess the question really is, was she a criminal mastermind who had a bunch of people executed for being, especially her ex-boyfriend, and is only her ex-boyfriend because she had him killed, or her common law husband, I should say, be like, oh no, sorry, bye. Or is she just a mom who's trying to protect her kids? Because like every time her kids got in trouble, Ma was like there in the court shouting, no, my kids don't do this. No, she would try to get them out all the time. So, I mean, I guess it's up to you because we'll never know because it was in the 30s. But I choose to, like you said, her picture leads me to believe that she was like up to no good.
Oh, for sure.
I'm trying to think like there's like, I'm trying to think there's like definitely I've seen like movies and stuff where you think it's like the kids or like the men involved. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, it's the woman. But for Women's History Month, we are apparently talking about a criminal boss who's a woman. So
yes.
So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I didn't know who she was until Tara told us about her, and I was glad to look in to see more. But with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. We will be back on Monday with another episode. Toodles!
Bye!